This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the X-Cast X-Files Podwatch. This is episode 7 of our whistle-stop tour of the X-Files as we get ready for season 11. And today we're covering episodes Fire and Beyond the Sea. I'm your host today, Carl Sweeney, and I'm delighted to be joined again by Keith R.A. DeCandido. Hello again, Keith.
Hi, Carl.
It's great to be talking to you again, Keith, after we spent a bit of time, we praised Ice, and we...
Did not praise space.
Yeah. We didn't have quite as many nice things to say about space, unfortunately.
No.
Before we get into Fire and Beyond the Sea, Keith, I know you had a bit of a role organising an X-Files convention of sorts back in the 1990s, and I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
It was a very small convention. It was called a File Cabinet, and it was run by myself and Laura Ann Gilman, who's also a novelist, and a bunch of other friends of ours were involved with it. Doris Egan was part of it as well. She's gone on to become a big TV writer and producer since then. We and a bunch of other people were involved. It was just a sort of relaxicon. I think we had maybe 150 people, if that.
Yeah.
It was very small. We had some nice, fun little panel discussions. We did viewings, all sorts of stuff. The first one was almost entirely X-Files focused. The second one was branched out a bit to some other genre shows that were contemporary. And we only did it for the 2 years. That was enough. I think that pretty much burned both of us out, both me and Laura Ann, out on running conventions. Like, okay, we did our bit. We can go back to just attending conventions now. Having said that, it was a lot of fun, and it was. There haven't been a lot of things that I have been enough of a fan of to want to actually do a convention. And so it was a really nifty experience, and I'm glad I did it, and we have good memories of it. And I still have the T-shirts we made. But
yeah, it sounds really good. I've never been to a convention of any sort, actually, so I don't know how I can call myself a fan, to be honest.
It's not a necessary part of the experience. My parents are huge science fiction fans. They're the ones who got me into science fiction in the first place. They're voracious readers and watchers of science fiction books and television and movies. But they never attended a convention, ever.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them any less, fans of science fiction. It's just not an aspect of fandom that they ever got involved in. It's not a necessary component. It's even less necessary now. You can just interact with people on the internet. And in fact, X-Files was one of the first really major internet fandoms to spring up. That's timing as much as anything. It was in the early 90s when bulletin boards were really starting to become a bit more pervasive, especially among the geek communities. So that was how we organized a lot of the X-Files was over the online bulletin boards we were involved with. So
yeah, and that actually had quite a big impact on the series as it developed.
Oh yeah.
Now, last time we talked, Keith, we remarked on the contrast between the brilliance of Ice and the not-so-brilliance of space, and maybe we'll have something similar to say today. Let's find out.
Somewhat. What's interesting is that these two episodes are back-to-back, and one really focuses on Mulder, and the other really focuses on Scully. So it's an interesting contrast, and looking... We get a little backstory on both of them in these two episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is the Mulder... the Mulder-centered one, which is Fire. It's season 1, episode 12, and we're in December 1993 at this moment. It was written by series creator Chris Carter and directed by Larry Shaw. And this is the episode with the character of Cecil Lively, who's the guy who can, by some miracle of pyrokinesis, he can set fire to things. Let me throw it over to you, Keith. What do you think of maybe Lively and the episode in general?
It's interesting. The last time I was on the show, I mentioned Robert Nepper moments, which is a phrase I coined from my Star Trek: The Next Generation rewatches on Tor.com, based on an early Next Gen episode where I had forgotten that Robert Nepper was in a particular episode. And after that, every time I've been rewatching the various Star Trek series for Tor.com over the last 6 years, and I always refer to it whenever somebody shows up that I had forgotten was in an episode as a Robert Nepper moment. Fire was a huge Robert Nepper moment. I had totally forgotten that Mark Allen Shepard was on the X-Files.
Yeah.
these days he's best known as playing Crowley on Supernatural.
Yeah.
A show that is in many ways the spiritual descendant of the X-Files. I was totally blown away. It's like, oh my God, it's Mark Sheppard, and he's so young. I had totally forgotten he was in that. The episode appealed to me, at least in part because of him, because Sheppard's a phenomenal actor, very charismatic, and he did a great job with Cecil here.
Yeah.
Particularly because he's very chameleonic. He's going, sometimes he's the crazed firebug, sometimes, and he's pretending to be the caretaker, so he's posing as the caretaker. There's this sort of sinister charm he displays when he's hitting on the woman in the bar, and so on. That's part of what makes what I had remembered about the episode. Like I said, I'd forgotten about Sheppard, but what I remembered about it was Amanda Pays, who I was a big fan of from back when she was on Max Headroom and The Flash TV series, and as a woman from Mulder's past. And I loved that aspect because she is exactly the kind of person who would wrap Mulder around her little finger and he would fall for it, especially a younger Mulder. I like the fact that you can tell that a younger Mulder was she ran rings around him totally, and now she's occasionally running rings around him, but not entirely. That he's a bit more mature, still a little vulnerable to her ability to mess with his head, but sort of starting to creep out of it.
Yeah, she's quite perverse in the way she toys with Mulder. Because the first time we are introduced to her, she's left a cassette that makes Mulder and Scully believe a car bomb is about to go off, and
yes, and it's all downhill from there.
And it's downhill from there, absolutely. And we then find out that she's a bit of an old flame, no pun intended, of Mulder's from his days at Oxford, and they had a passionate encounter atop Arthur Conan Doyle's tombstone. Yeah, the character of Phoebe Green is a bit of an infamous one in the opinion of many fans. She's not popular at all amongst the fandom more broadly, I don't think.
Yeah, that almost I don't get that at all. She's exactly the kind of person, like I said, that Mulder would have gotten involved with as a young person. Not so much now, but a young idealistic Mulder who hadn't quite been beaten down by cynicism yet, and who is still recovering from the trauma of losing his sister, would absolutely be vulnerable to somebody like her. So I thought she was an absolutely perfect woman from his past. What
is interesting, actually, in the IDW anthologies that you contributed a story to, I think there's definitely one, possibly two stories where the writers bring back Phoebe Green. So even though she only appears the once, she does she exerts a bit of a hold on the imagination, whether you like her or not.
Yeah. The episode itself is okay. It's a perfectly good serial killer story with an X-Files twist on it, in that he's an actual pyrokinetic as opposed to just a pyromaniac. The investigatory beats are nicely done. There's a few instances of the sort of thing people in television do all the time, which is they don't reveal information they have until the plot needs them to reveal it.
Yeah.
Like, why can't Scully have shared that information with Mulder before she flew up to Boston? It never made sense that she couldn't just tell him what he needed to know over the phone. I also found it a little hard to believe that, yes, it was a big house, but I can't believe that nobody noticed a burning corpse in one of the bathrooms. Corpse. It was obviously his private bathroom, but still, somebody should have noticed the smell at some point.
I think the scene I really like in this episode, I'm not a huge fan of the episode in general, but I do like the scene with Cecil and the two kids, where he's trying to goad the child into smoking.
And they won't do.
Yeah, Sheppard gives his all in the episode as a whole, but he's great in that scene, I think.
Yeah, it's an adequate episode. As an X-File, it's okay. It's pretty much a run-of-the-mill Monster of the Week thing. It could have, the procedural beats could have been handled a little better. And I thought, especially this early in the series, Scully's reaction to Phoebe just felt a little too extreme. Big deal. It's her partner's old boyfriend. She's only been with Mulder for a short time at this point. She has, yes, they have they've been forming a bond, but it doesn't seem to be enough for her to act that catty. So it just, that never felt right either. But Amanda Pays is always wonderful. And it was an interesting insight into who Mulder was when he was younger.
Yeah, and the intention was for Phoebe to be a recurring character, I think, but for one reason or another, that didn't materialise.
Yeah.
When you consider how fully formed and just flat out brilliant the next episode is, Fire's always going to suffer by comparison. So let's turn our thoughts to Beyond the Sea. Okay, so Beyond the Sea is episode 13 of season 1. January 1994 is when it aired. And it's the great writing team of Glenn Morgan and James Wong, paired with the director David Nutter. And this is the episode that begins with the death of Scully's father, William Scully.
Well, introducing them, first of all. We get Don Davis and Sheila Larkin making their first appearances.
Yeah, I think this is brilliant because up to this point, we've heard, I think it's a one line in the pilot, which is where Scully says that joining the FBI was an act of rebellion, or her parents saw it as an act of rebellion. And then we get Beyond the Sea, and we get this short, it's 2 or 3 minutes long, this scene. And I think it just brilliantly sketches out the relationship that these characters have to each other. And it does it in such a nice way, in such a subtle way. And it's the performances, it's the dialogue, it's everything. And it's just a fantastic, almost like a self-contained short film that kicks the episode off.
Yeah, and nobody ever went wrong casting Don Davis as an authority figure. I mean, he made a career out of playing military and law enforcement characters as it was, and he plays the elder Scully beautifully. The reserve, the difficulty in showing affection, and yet the affection's there anyway. It's like he's bad at showing it overtly, but you can tell it's sort of underlying, which is something, Davis does particularly well. And like one example of what you were just saying, the look that her mother gives him to try to get him to actually open up and talk to her. And you can tell it's not quite what she wanted him to say, but it's close enough.
Yeah.
When he asks housework.
Yeah, it's such a lovely moment, and you can, like you say, you can tell that Scully's pleased that he's made the comment, and it's just a marvellously subtle way to kick off the episode. And then Scully sees she has a vision of her father sitting in the chair opposite her as she wakes up before she gets the phone call that he's died.
Yeah,
and her response, of course, is to carry on with work, but she gets embroiled in this investigation that involves, they're trying to catch this killer, Lucas Jackson Henry, and the incarcerated Luther Lee Boggs. We've got to talk about him, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Brad Dourif.
It's an interesting contrast. In Fire, the episode was not that well written, but we remember it because of good casting of Amanda Pays and Mark Allen Shepard. In this case, the good casting supplements an already excellent script. In Don Davis, Sheila Larkin, and especially Brad Dourif.
Oh, yeah.
We have some superb casting. I mean, Boggs is a tough character to pull off. This is a character who could very easily have devolved into an over-the-top, ridiculous performance.
Yeah.
And Dourif really pulled it off beautifully. The character was nuanced and complex, and you could tell that being a psychic wasn't something that was actually doing him any favors. It was unpleasant for him. It was difficult. And it was very convincing. It worked really well.
Oh yeah, and he's got this kind of coiled intensity. I don't know quite how he does it here. And like you say, in the wrong hands, this could have easily descended into sort of scenery chewing, but it just doesn't happen here. It works a treat. Even down to the fact that we get a sense of how scared he is of his own death. It's a marvelously, like you say, nuanced character and a great performance.
The body language in particular is really good, which is something Dourif has always been good at. Knowing exactly the right way to stand and to sit and to turn his head and, so on. It's he doesn't have one particular way of playing it. I'm remembering when he was on Voyager also as a serial killer.
Yeah.
But in that case, he was much more controlled. His body language is completely different. He stood ramrod straight all the time. In direct contrast to Boggs, who was constantly sort of in a 45-degree angle to everything all the time. Like he's trying to crawl out of his own skin. Just a beautifully done performance. And then on top of that, you've got Scully and Mulder kind of switching places in their usual role in a case. Because Mulder does believe generally in the paranormal, it means he's going to be way more unforgiving of a fake.
Yeah.
Because, he's almost going to take that personally,
Yeah.
that somebody's, trying, because it makes it harder for him to prove that the paranormal does exist when people are actually, faking it. And then, of course, Scully is confronted with pretty significant evidence that he is a psychic, except, of course, there's an out, as even Scully herself admits at the end. If Boggs was working with the kidnapper,
yep,
he would still, and there were ways he could have known all that stuff, but probably not. I mean, it's the X-Files. Yeah, he was a psychic.
But you're right though. It's such it's a brilliantly structured episode as well, I think. Darren Morgan talked about when he was writing Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, he talked about he would watch and rewatch Beyond the Sea just to see what his brother and James Wong did in terms of the story structure. Yeah, it moves like clockwork, this episode.
Yeah.
One thing we should say is that Gillian Anderson really hits it out of the park as well, because she's asked to do things here that she hasn't really done yet on the series. But every challenge that they throw at her in terms of the script is met with with aplomb, isn't it? Because she, opposite Dorothy, and in the whole episode really, is fantastic.
And subtly too. She doesn't overplay Scully's grief, but you can tell, like in the first scene when she first walks into the office after her father died, that she's a little off.
Yeah.
Not a lot, just enough to know that something's wrong. It's one of the things I absolutely loved about the show generally, and about Anderson in particular, and I've always loved about her, is that she is a very, very subtle actor. She can do just little things with just tiny, almost micro changes to her facial expression that can convey a world of emotion and feeling.
Yeah.
And this episode, she really gets to play that up. I mean, she does eventually, break down more significantly as the episode goes on, but it takes a while, and it's really well played.
Yeah, and when it does come, it just feels appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keith, when you were on the Xcast the first time, I think you named this as your joint favourite episode of the entire series. So just finally, to wrap up our discussion of Beyond the Sea, do you still stand by that assessment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm fond of both of these episodes is that it provides revelations about each of the two main characters, about who they were and how that has affected who they are now. In Scully's case, the fact that she grew up as a military brat, and that her parents didn't entirely approve of her going into law enforcement, that they wanted her to just be a doctor. And even little things like the Ahab and Starbuck nicknames they had for each other. Just a wonderful little touch. I'm a sucker for any episode that provides us with interesting revelations about characters' pasts. That I really appreciated. And yes, and plus on top of that, you've got, I mean, just as the last time I was on the show, I talked about how Ice was basically the thing from another world as an X-File. Beyond the Sea is basically the Silence of the Lambs as an X-File, but it works.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with wearing your influences on your sleeve as long as, the shirt is neat.
Yes.
And it very much is in this case. It works really well. It's a very strong script, elevated by three superb performances from Brad Dourif, from Gillian Anderson, and from Don Davis, who, didn't get much to work with. It was really only one scene, plus, one or two little flashes after that. Yeah. But you really got such a good sense of who he was just from that one, from the teaser. I miss Don Davis. He was. I was so happy when they cast him in Stargate SG-1, because he was one of those guys who always showed up as a guest star on other people's shows, and giving him a chance to actually flesh out a character more. He was another one who was very good at subtle emoting.
Yeah,
and he managed to do a lot with very little in that teaser.
Absolutely, yep. And his character in Twin Peaks is still figuring into the new series, even though obviously Don Davis has sadly passed away.
Oh, so they were able to. I haven't caught up with the new Twin Peaks yet, so I haven't. I'm glad they were able to work him in, at least in some way or other, as a tribute to him, because he deserved that.
Yeah, Major Briggs. He's still a part of the Twin Peaks universe.
Good.
Absolutely.
Good.
Okay, Keith, my thanks to you. That's Fire and Beyond the Sea done. Tomorrow, on the Xcast X-Files Podwatch. It's Genderbender and Lazarus. Until then, if you want to find us on Twitter, we're at the X_cast. And we're on Facebook too. If you type in Xcast, you should find X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group. And we're updating that with all the news we can find about Season 11 as we eagerly anticipate its arrival early in 2018. But that's it until next time, listeners. Trust no one.